when you said you changed, did you email me? Somebody changed your idea. You didn't change your idea for your project, right? Okay. Who emailed me and said they changed? Somebody. All right, moving along, we're chapter 3, quality and performance. All right, so as we're looking through the process and how we design a process of operation for businesses, we're reviewing the systems we have in place, we need to take into account quality, right? So quality is value perceived to the customer, but it's also perceived to the owner, it's also perceived to whoever has a vested interest in the outcome of the product or service. Now, poor quality costs. It can cost in many ways, right? It can cost financially, meaning that we are losing items through this process, right? We have a ton of waste, right? Think we can lose customers. So poor quality has an economic cost, and it also has a very direct cost as well too, right, with customers, we gain those customers. So here we're looking at defining the 4 major costs of quality and a relationship to the role of ethics in determining the overall cost of delivering products and services. Right? Next, we're looking at explaining the basic principles of total quality management. So the idea here is, when we're looking at quality, is are we inspecting what's coming through the process, right? Either with products that we receive from suppliers, or we're doing inspections so we can reject orders from our suppliers, so that those items we're receiving are not going to be defective to our customers or our clients, right? Because if they're defective to our customers or our clients, they're going to return it, right? Or they receive something poor quality, it's going to damage the business, because word of mouth is, they're going to tell people, right? And this could be at the most simplest level. You could say you go to a coffee shop, and you're like, that day the coffee sucked, right? That product sucked. And I communicate that to a bunch of other people, like, man, don't stay away from there, you should go to the other place. You should go to their competitors. Their competitors, last time I tried them, had really great coffee. You said, what happened in that process? Right? We go back and we talk to the owner or the workers, and they're like, hey, you know what, that day we just had a really bad batch of coffee. Something was bad, something was up with the coffee. Something was bad with our water supply that day, right? So the water made the coffee taste like crap, right? Or you say, you know what, they didn't put a fresh pot of coffee. And so they gave me poor quality coffee. And now they lost a customer. And now they probably lost more potential customers, because I told everybody else, don't go there, the coffee stinks. All from not managing the quality of the coffee within the total process, right? From open to close. And even beyond open to close, actually maybe inspecting the coffee as a receiver from their supplier. Make sure there's nothing damaged, no holes, mice get to it, something of the sort. Maybe get exposed to oxygen. Something could have diminished the quality of the coffee. Now, we think about a bigger scale, yes, we could look at car manufacturers, right? Manufacturers of, say, soda, and look at the various assembly lines and processing in those. That's a little bit more of a burden to actually have inspectors come in, right? Or make inspection part of the process before the final product is delivered, right? So quality can be measured various ways. One is internally, you're inspecting what you're receiving from suppliers. Others is maybe just looking overall at the total quality of what customers' perceptions are. Now, we're also going to understand how acceptance sampling and process performance approaches interface in the supply chain. Acceptance sampling is basically sampling a part of what your supplier sends to you, and if you note that there's something bad with just a sample, you reject the whole thing, right? So you're looking at samples. And describe how to construct process control charts and use them to determine whether a process is out of statistical control. So we'll look at statistical control, upper limits, lower limits of control. How much can we produce before quality suffers? What's the maximum output we can do before you're just not getting the same product or service anymore? And what's the lowest we could go in terms of having great quality? We have the greatest, but we go so low that it's no longer even profitable for us, right? So you have to think quality actually has to be balanced. So you may think, hey, did Apple or Tesla push out the greatest quality item? The answer is probably not. Of course they could have did that, right? But it doesn't make sense from a business perspective. It's like, hey, we got 4 quarters in a year. We need to constantly push out new stuff. So we can't give you all everything at once, right? So quality is actually managed. Like, hey, we manage it to a degree that's acceptable to the customer. Maybe we don't give you the greatest thing possible. Because if not, we can't reintroduce the thing next quarter, next year, right? Or add something onto it. All right, also we want to explain how to determine whether a process is capable of producing a service or product to specifications, right? How do we measure, say, what is the perfect cup of coffee? Maybe it has a specific measurement, concoction, so that you get the same taste across the board. We go about measuring that. Describe international quality documentation standards and Baldrige performance excellence programs, and understand the systems approach to total quality management. All right, the cost of quality. Many companies spend significant time, effort, and expenses on systems, training. So you say, hey, quality in terms of a service could be our training, right? If we have quality training, we will have quality employees to service the customers, right? Maybe we have good systems in place. Maybe we've designed a system to where everything happens the minute it's supposed to happen, so that the final product is made at a specific time to be given to the customer. And then we can also do changes around the organization to improve the quality. It could be very simple things, right? It could be reorganization of machines, placing them in different places, moving things around, transferring one group of people to another set of work that needs to be done. We could do organizational processes. And for here, we say a defect is any instance when a process fails to satisfy its customer. Remember, we say we're customers too, because we purchase from suppliers, right? So suppliers could be giving us defects. And then in which case, that chain will lead to customers having a defect. So when you receive a defective product, what are you doing with it as customers? What do you do with defective food? You say throw it out and don't eat it. What would you do if it's in the restaurant?
Have the reason to tell them, I didn't like it, take it back.
Yeah, you're like, hey, you know what? No, this, whatever. This pork is no good or something. Take it back. You say, take it back. Oh, we gotta redo the meal all over again, right? So now the cook has to stop what he was doing, maybe from a secondary meal. Make sure that, because you came along first, make sure your meal is good. Throw out the bad meal, right? Waste that. And now you delayed time for the second person to receive their food. The first person's being delayed because they received a bad batch of food. And you've also wasted the actual food itself. So you're like, hey, you probably cost yourself a customer, maybe 2, right? Or maybe that group, 2 groups of customers. And you cost yourself the actual physical product, right? So the process failed to satisfy the customer. Now, how could you have gone to make sure in a restaurant setting that the food is gonna be of quality? What could you do? What could you possibly think of? Let's say you work in a restaurant and you manage it. You wanna make sure that the customers receive the best exact quality with their expectations of what these meals should be. What could you do? make sure you're receiving the best. What do you think? Yes?
Something our managers would do is on their day off, they would call in and order, and they would actually order from the restaurant itself on their days off to see if people were actually getting good food.
Right, so you could do surprise orders, surprise secret shoppers, right? Mystery shoppers, someone randomly showing up to be like, hey, is this the expectations that normal customers should receive? What else could you do in the process? What else could you think of at a restaurant? Who could inspect the food? Right? I mean, you could have somebody, you could have the chef taste it, right? Taste it. Does the sauce taste like good, right? Does the meat taste good? Do a sample of that too. You could taste as you prepare. You say this is a requirement that you have somebody either on the side that taste it, and their job is just to make sure that customers are receiving the quality. So therefore, you know that you're not going to lose any quality going out to the food. Or you can have a worker or an employee already there, like the chef, doing it as he conducts his cooking, right? Something can be done on the outside, right? Or you say, hey, you know what, make sure we just have quality suppliers from the outside. Prevention costs associated with preventing defects before they happen, right? So either you can have someone inspect before you even take the orders and receive, well, confirm the orders, right? Or you can have someone inspect along the chain of command. Appraisal costs incurred when the firm assesses the performance level of this process. This costs money too, right? It costs money to observe the quality, to test the quality, to buy instrumentation, to measure the quality. If you think of a very large scale operation, we're talking about car manufacturers or candy makers, chocolatiers. On this assembly line, you would have to buy tons of equipment to look at the various concoctions of sugar, right? Look at test the structure of different devices being placed in them, electrical circuits, all sorts of things would need all sorts of testing, right? It'd be a heavy burden, but it may be worth it because now you say you're not gonna lose in relation to competitors. Internal failure costs resulting from defects that are discovered during the production of a service or a product. Why is this such a major thing? Like during the production?
Because it halts all further production, so
Yeah.
one is fixed.
Yeah, you say, hey, we got a process, and you halt the whole process, right? So you say you halt the whole process, that's cost. That means that you might have to have people work overtime now to get out what you originally started as the goal for a number of products being built that day, right? You say that overtime will cost the company and your bottom line will decrease. External failure costs. Costs that arise when a defect is discovered after the customer receives the service or product. Why is that a major thing? What are some costs there you could think of just in your own life that creates a loss of money for companies that you buy from? Do you return stuff from Amazon sometime? Right? Think of Amazon has to ship it back now. So Amazon says, hey, you know, we guarantee we'll replace the item, but we shipped it to you once, now we gotta ship it to you back. If it's defective, we gotta throw it out, right? Now we gotta get you a new one that could potentially went to someone else. So you think of just calculate that amount of cost. Like not only is just the product itself, it's the logistics of it, right? It's receiving it in somewhere, discarding it someplace, what to do with the defective thing, sending you a new one. Maybe you didn't have extra, right? Maybe you had already planned for a certain amount of products. Now you have to order an extra one for your dissatisfied customer. ton of calls. You bet, all that from one transaction that went bad. What else can you think of? Give me some instances where you've exchanged or returned things. What have you exchanged or returned lately? What are the names of the name? Exchanged or returned? Right? I had an issue with a watch that I bought, right? And I had to send it back to get repaired, and it took like 2 to 3 months to get it back, right? So that amount of time for me was kind of like, hey, you know what? I was a very dissatisfied customer. I probably have to go somewhere else next time I want to get watch repaired or something like that, right? All right, ethical failure costs, societal and monetary costs associated with deceptively passing defective services or products to internal or external customers, such that it jeopardizes the well-being of stockholders, customers, employees, partners, and creditors. Where have you seen this happen? Where a company has failed or a product has failed in giving customers quality. Like the quality's so poor that, make their share of stocks go down, or it jeopardizes people's health. It really disrupted a significant portion of society. Any companies you could think of? Yes.
Samsung, their Galaxy Note 7, like in 2016, when the batteries were exploding.
Yeah, you're like, yes, Samsung, right? Galaxy, the batteries were overheating and exploding. There was a defect in the systems with the batteries, right? How it regulates the heat, et cetera, et cetera. Right, dangerous because people have phones on airplanes, right? You bring your phone, and if that could potentially explode, could lead to a fire. A fire could potentially kill everybody on the airplane, right? So a lot of the airline services were sort of not allowing you to bring whichever Galaxy there was, the 7, not sure what it was. You can say that's a total disruption to a lot of people because really your whole life is in that phone, right? So now you have to do something different, get a different device, and those are very expensive devices. So Samsung has to discard these $1,200, $1,300 phones, either to re-engineer them or repair them, or to just give out new phones to a bunch of people. So you're talking billions of dollars of losses, and Samsung's stock had suffered as such. What else? You can think of companies that's been deceptive by passing defective products.
There's like the lettuce thing with all the lettuce, like had bad chemicals in it, and they had to recall it all from all the stores.
Yeah, you think of like food, right? You always see a ton of news about recalls, right? Don't eat the spinach, don't eat this lettuce, right? Maybe there's some carcinogen on it or some sort, or it's defective, it's bad food of some sort. And you're like, really, well, what can the people do? Yeah, you waste your money, because I doubt most people are not gonna go back to grocery store to bring back, if it's been 3 days or something like that. All right, so it's typically in the customer's mind, you say, hey, whatever brand that was, I just probably don't trust that brand, right? So I gotta pick a new brand of lettuce, whoever's, producing that lettuce or something, right? So perception is huge, because once you go bad the first time, you're really trying to get someone to believe that you're gonna do it right the second time, and most people won't even take that chance. What else? Can you think of anything else? Right? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, would you put in Temu and Shane and those sorts of products? Or you say, hey, you know what? The customer is expected to be football. What do you think of those sorts of products? AliExpress. You think they're deceptive in sort of some of the products they put up on there? Or not really, because the cost doesn't reflect. Who here shops on Temu and AliExpress and Shane and all of that? No one? Right, it could be maybe deceptively practices, but a lot of that is foreign companies So it makes it difficult to even kind of create justice with that, right? Banks have gone through these issues as well too, right? Not having enough money for people to access their funds, up to the $250,000 federal deposit insurance level. And people have complained about that, pulling their money out of banks and placing it elsewhere, yes.
Wasn't that like last year, the Silicon Valley Bank failing?
Yeah, that was,
So they didn't have
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
money, and Meghan Markle and whatever the princess name was.
yeah, I think what, they didn't have enough money in the bank or something like that to cover, people's withdrawals or something like that. So basically, you're not getting your money, and you gotta wait till you get the money, like, that doesn't make sense, right? So yes, doing unethical practices can lead to huge failures with partners, creditors, whatever. Alright, so what's the philosophy of total quality management, right? We say this stresses 3 principles for achieving high levels of process performance and quality. The first one is customer satisfaction. Nothing matters unless your customer is satisfied, right? Nothing matters. So think about even your ideas. Your ideas, are they wonderful to you, or are they gonna be wonderful for the customer, right? The primary sort of objective is like, hey, I think this would be phenomenal for customers, right? Not phenomenal for me, right? So we have to think customer satisfaction. How satisfied customers will be. 2, employee involvement. Really, really critical, because you need people that work in groups and teams in order to get these functions complete, right? And how involved can you make them? How do you motivate them? How do you make them understand the goals of that day, that week, of that quarter, right? How do you make sure that their performance meets your expectations as a manager, an owner, a leader, or whatnot? What are some ways you could do to increase employee involvement? Right? When we say total process management, so we just focus on employees and say, hey, employees are very critical to the process of customers being satisfied. What can we do to boost employee involvement?
Incentivizing?
Yeah, you say incentives of any kind, right? Right? These are the tricks. What's one of the greatest tricks you can use as an owner, manager, to incentivize employees? What's one that may not even require money? What do you think? Titles. Right? We live in a title inflation world. You can say, hey, you're no longer a janitor. That's not your title anymore. You're the facilities manager. And guess what? It works, right? Person is, you boost morale, you boost their performance. Now you get greater self-esteem, they feel great about the job. They probably tell their family, hey, I'm not a janitor anymore. What are you? Oh, what do you do for work? I'm a facilities manager, right? And that sense of even psychology allows that person, if you want them to have a leadership role, probably to become extremely more motivated to delegate tasks to other people. Or you say, you know what, you can incentivize them monetarily, give them the 50-cent raise with an increase in the title, right? So you have to also manage that. Can't give too much money because it eats into the bottom line, but you do want to increase involvement. Maybe you retrain, right? Retrain on a new process. You're like, hey, we got a new process of how we're gonna be doing this. We need to get everybody together. Or you say, hey, you know what? You have continued education. You work for some software company producing something, like, hey, you make sure you take your continued education courses, right? This week you need to focus on this and that. And it continues. It's part of the process to keep people educated on new things within the company, right? That helps overall quality. And then third is continuous improvement on performance, right? Which is kind of a broad one, which is just basically looking at the overall process and how you improve it, right? Improving performance, making things faster, quicker, through the use of automation, through the use of machines, right? Through the use of taking out steps required to complete something. All right, and then we got Six Sigma. Who's heard of Six Sigma before? Anyone? All right, so Six Sigma is this philosophy on a comprehensive and flexible system for achieving, sustaining, and maximizing business success by minimizing defects and variability in process. Major one is eliminating variability, right? Making sure that everything works at like 99%, automatically or correct or quality, right? So Six Sigma is eliminating margin of error, right? Elimination of margin or error, elimination that likelihood there'll be an error. And like, well, we can measure this. So you say in the process of making 100 sandwiches at Subway, 95 of them have come out with no complaints, 5 complaints, right? But that's wonderful, that's 95%, right? We got a 5% margin of error, it's good, excellent. Now what would be bad, it's like, oh, you know what, out of 100, 80 are good, 20 complaints, right? That's horrible, right? Like really 1/5 of your sandwiches receive complaints. So Six Sigma is like, well, how do we look at that? How do we measure that? We want to make sure that there's no variability. We don't want it to be 80% this week, 92% the following week, 75 the following week, right? Therefore, we can't keep up, right? As an organizational manager, we can't keep up for our expectations. We have no idea when it'll be a good week, when it'll be a bad week, right? We want to always have an idea of how do we know what's going to occur. And how could you do that? Think of Subway. How could you go about doing that for everybody? What could you do to increase the performance of 100 sandwiches? Yeah.
Put them through the training gap.
Yeah, you say, okay, hey, we gotta retrain these people. And give them a couple more times, and you measure it, and you're like, now we have to fire these people, right? The metrics don't add up. Or you have to dig down really to say, where does the error occur? Does the error occur at the lettuce, the baking stage, right? Is it the time, the amount of time? Is it the whole thing? You have to figure that out and improve that process too. All right, so we're looking here at the total quality management wheel. At the center, we say nothing matters if customers are not satisfied, right? And if customers are not satisfied, they're basically going to a competitor. And which is the case is so important for you with your projects to not just think of wonderful idea, you really gotta dig down and look at the research of your competitor. If you see somebody doing something well, you can deduce that customers are satisfied. Seems pretty common sense, right? If customers are satisfied, you have to ask yourself, what do they do here to make customers satisfied? So there's no need to reinvent the wheel with your business, right? Don't reinvent it. Look to see what works. That's valid information and research has already been done. And say what doesn't work, right? Look at the comparison map. What do they not do that maybe a few other places do that maybe increases sales in some way or customer satisfaction, all right? So looking at that, we say, hey, all right, we want continuous improvement. Wonderful. Well, let's move to the outside. We could say problem-solving tools, right? So we need new tools. We need new ways to measure things, observe things, make things, and that can increase customer satisfaction. Poor design, right? Poor service, right? Service is horrible because of whatever reason. Product design sucks. People don't like the aesthetics. People don't like how it operates. The process design, how you go from point A to point B B for final complete product, maybe that's good or maybe it's poor, right? Purchasing. Think of purchasing, how important that would be for like TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Right, because you're like, that's such a variable business in terms of clothing and items. You're like, it's just a bunch of stuff in here. Yeah, they probably do keep the same brands, right? They probably have some agreement with Polo Ralph Lauren and Michael Kors or whoever they're keeping in there. Feel like it's a bunch of random stuff. So a critical component to that would be who actually buys the stuff from these places to put it in the store to sell to people, right? But that would depend on how much stuff is being bought versus how much has to be given away because nobody wants this crap. You see that a lot too with even luxury fashion houses, right? The Gucci's, the Louis Vuittons, whatever. Such an important process is the creative aspect, like the creative directors, right? And people that know how to purchase good materials for the fashion, like extremely important, right? We're purchasing the best quality stuff with good designs, and at the end of the day, it makes us better than everybody else, right? We get more money, people pay more for it. So purchasing is important, right? And then we got benchmarking too, which is basically setting some standards, knowing where we could be with upper limits of things, lower limits. We want to have that in place too. And then we got employee involvement and our continuous improvement. All that leads to customer satisfaction. All right, what else creates customer satisfaction? We say conformance to specifications, right? If we're thinking back to sandwiches, we say, is there a way we can make sure that there's the right amount of lettuce on each sandwich? Right amount of tomato. Hey, you know we do a foot long when we put 5 tomatoes, right? That's it, right? Maybe there's a specification for even something as simple as a sandwich. Maybe a specification for Starbucks, right? Making your favorite macchiato or hot chocolate or cold drink. Like, hey, we need the right amount measured for each item that goes into this specific drink, right? And anything too much or too less, customer's like, man, this is too sweet, right? This is not sweet enough. This doesn't taste right. Could you redo it again? All right, so conformance to specifications. Have everything already measured out in some way that we conform to it. Value, which is the one we talked about the first week. Value is huge, right? But to say value is very abstract, but super important because we all value different things for different reasons. But value deals with customer perception of satisfaction, right? What do they perceive as great about this thing? Value can be what? Name some things of value to you for when you buy something.
It's good quality, it lasts a long time.
Yeah, you say good quality. What was not good quality? What else could you value besides quality? Yes.
Good price.
Hey, you say a good price. Walmart, everyday low price, right? You don't need the best. You don't need Whole Foods. You don't care about organic this and organic that, right? Just want something that's cheap, that needs to meet your satisfactory needs. What else? In terms of value. Right, convenience, right? You can say, hey, I might spend a little bit more money ordering my groceries, but guess what? I don't have to leave the house, right? Right, that's a ton of value, right? And so the grocery stores will be like, hey, you know what? Amazon's selling food now. What do we need to do? Let people order our food at Mariano's and Jewel online and be able to get delivered to their house, right? Because our competitor is killing it by having that option, right? So we have to conform to that as well too. Fitness for use, right? Does the item or service fits the utility of it, right? Does it do what you want it to do, right? Does it do what you want it to do? Also support. Hey, I have a problem with this thing. What is the remedy to my issue? I have a problem with this. Is there anything, is anybody to call? Is there anything on the back of the packaging where I can email, right? How do I solve my problem? Think of what our phones, right? You have an issue, it's not acting right, the cell service is bad, something's going, maybe your bill, there's something wrong with your bill. You have to call support in order to remedy that issue. What are some other forms of support in other industries you could think of? Can you think of other support systems in other business industries?
Maybe like social medias?
Yeah, sure. Right, so you could say, hey, we use social media or the internet in order to support the business, right? Maybe you could throw marketing in there in some way, right? Using social media for that. Maybe you have a platform where people can engage and speak about the product and have this whole sort of social environment about the thing, right? And that creates satisfaction. Think of too, if it's like things dealing with green items and people have the impression that they're, saving the planet or doing something like that, something online would be very valuable in terms of support for people to engage. And one of the last ones and big ones is psychological impressions, right? What is your impression of that item, the brand? What's your impression of the brand? What does it say to you, right? When you think of Apple, what do you think? The brand Apple, what do you think? What are some words, nouns, verbs, adjectives that come up when you think of Apple? How would you describe Apple as a brand?
Their products are all very sleek and professional looking.
Sleek, right? You say Apple is sleek, right? It's very good. What else? For anything, what do you think of with Nike, with Gucci, with Louis Vuitton, with Samsung, with Tesla? Any sort of psychological impressions you have about those companies or brands? What about Nike? How do you view Nike as a brand? What would you have to say about it as a brand? Quality, affordable, expensive, designs. Right, so psychological impressions are huge in terms of total quality management because we're looking on perception. How are you perceived as a business and as a product by customers? Right? Because how you are perceived inevitably makes you jack up the price of that. Right? So you think, how is it possible that people spend $500, $600 worth of shoes? $400, $500 worth of that is psychological impression. Right? So you just played on the psychology, and you probably use others to do it, right? You probably use social things to support it, right? Good marketing could do that. Meaning that if you don't have this, we consider you poor, right? We consider you broke if you don't have this, and nobody wants to feel broke, even if you're broke, right? So you'll waste your money and spend on ridiculous things you can't afford because it has a heavy psychological impression on you if you don't get that thing. It makes you feel bad or feel good. Okay? Make you feel wonderful. All right, and so with employee involvement, we have cultural change. I've done work as an organizational psychologist and a lot of interesting work. Right, looking at the different type of personalities to get into certain positions within a company. Right, you don't want to hire everybody for a position. You usually want to hire somebody who fits that culture. Right, so organizations have a culture. So when you start your businesses, right, as you're working on your project, you say, what is the culture of my business? What do I value as important? Right, some of the things may go into like the mission statements. right? Objective statements, say what's the culture? Right, the culture here is that we focus on customers, we're very detailed, we're engaging, we're very supportive, right? Whatever the cultural items may be. And if it could be cultural too in an ethnic sense, right? So who was doing the Latin, who was it, Latin foods or something? You remember, what were you doing for your project? The jury? Is that the jury? Oh, who you the jury? Yeah. So you think of like the culture of that, right? You have to reinforce a very heavy like Latin cultural aesthetic about that thing too, right? And then how do you change the culture, right? How do you go about changing? If you tell customers we're retraining you, we're doing something different, now you have a whole new problem. Because now your employees, I'm saying, you'll have a whole new problem because employees say, I'm no longer happy working here. You know, Sensei changes is not the same, like does not the same, right? You change, the culture's changing. And so now you have to reinvigorate your employees again so that they still like working this job and then stick around, right? But you say cultural change is necessary, why? Because everything changes. The environment, the external environment changes, new trends, people are doing new things, new technologies. So everything changes. Right? You have to look towards working at cultural changes. Teams, employee empowerment, problem solving teams. So you could divide your teams into people who just solve immediate problems, right? You could say there's a group of individuals here who works on day-to-day things. You could divide teams into special purpose. Special purpose could be new products or services coming out in the future. And then you can have self-managed teams, right? Some of maybe your most skilled and intelligent employees who are able to manage themselves, but they're working groups overlooking a major aspect of your operations within your business. For the most case, for those who are not working, once you graduate, apply for jobs, usually you're gonna be working in teams, right? So either you'll be a good team player and have to adapt to sort of that culture, working with a bunch of group of people with a bunch of individual personalities, which should be unique. So kind of prepare yourself for that. Usually things are done in teams now, for the most part. All right, and we'll wrap up with these last two. Continuous improvement, the philosophy of continuously seeking ways to improve processes based on a Japanese concept called Kaizen. Who's ever heard of Kaizen? All right, so Kaizen looks at basically almost like Six Sigma. It's just reducing the margin of error in any process by focusing on different aspects, right? And we got a plan, do, check cycle, which is a cycle all called the Deming Wheel, used by firms to actively engage in continuous improvement to train their work teams in problem solving. So this, in essence, is a philosophy that you give to the employees. Employees is basically almost like this class. You're like, hey, we're constantly trying to train your brain to think that we want you to keep thinking of what you can improve in the job that you do. Right? Yeah, you work this job, you do this task, but we want everybody to constantly be thinking on how to improve these tasks. And we'll have our little meetings, we get in a meeting and we'll talk about it, like, hey, okay, what about what you're doing? Could you do this? Could you do this better? Could we eliminate that? Hey, why do we have that? What if we took this out and add that? Right? So if you give that sort of mindset or mantra to your employees, essentially they could do the work for you, right? So they do the work for you in terms of looking for continuous improvement in this total quality management process. All right, we'll end off here.